Now, El Salvador recently made history when they became the first country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. But what the heck does legal tender mean anyway? That's what I was wondering, so I did a lot more research, found some myths floating around, and some potential game changers, second order effects. So in this video, I'm gonna break down everything you gotta know about legal tender and how that will impact Bitcoin. So if you wanna learn more, strap in my friend and let's dive right in. So I was at the Bitcoin Miami conference when this El Salvador legal tender news dropped. It was literally the talk of town, right? It stood out to me because that meant that we were ahead of Bitcoin's adoption schedule. Remember, there's this progression that people talk about, like last cycle is retail, this cycle institutions, and then next cycle nation states, right? So El Salvador was coming in like a cycle earlier, and I was like, dang, this could be huge. This might be the domino that pushes other countries to adopt Bitcoin as well. Now, let's take a step back and start with the definition though, right? Straight from Wikipedia, legal tender is a form of money that courts of law are required to recognize as satisfactory payment for any monetary debt. This means that whatever is legal tender, you can use to pay off things like taxes, fines, and so forth. There is an important distinction you gotta know though. Eric Voorhees, CEO of Shapeshift, points it out when he writes, quote, "There seems to be some confusion on what legal tender means. It does not mean that someone must receive payment in a specific form. It does mean that someone must accept that form of payment to settle a debt, if the debtor prefers to pay in said form." To illustrate, I'm a merchant in the US and I don't want to accept dirty USD fiat garbage. I'll only accept Bitcoin. This is legal. I am not required to accept USD, but if someone owes me a debt for whatever past exchange and he offers me USD to settle, I must accept that, end quote. Now, different countries can have different laws surrounding legal tender, like what counts as it and what can you do with it. El Salvador goes one step further, making Bitcoin acceptance mandatory if merchants have the technological capability. Here's a few more examples for you to make things more clear, right? Like checks and credit cards are not considered legal tender. They're what you consider money substitutes. Also, legal tender does not have to be fiat money, right? Which is what governments decree to have value. I mean, courts have ordered creditors to accept commodities like tobacco before as payments for debt owed. Another myth floating around is that governments will give up their ability to print money if they adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. I mean, El Salvador already couldn't print their own money because they used the US dollar as their currency, and before that was their only legal tender. But now, at least, they plan on mining Bitcoin with their renewable source of energy from their volcanoes. So that's their roundabout way of printing money per se. Let's be real though, this is one bold experiment by El Salvador, and there's no guarantee of success. But I believe that it's definitely worth trying because there's so many potential benefits. Like for nations like El Salvador, they can make remittances cheaper and faster, and they can encourage investment in their country by the Bitcoin industry. And for Bitcoin, this could bring millions of new potential users and kickstart more adoption by nations around the world. After all, you know that countries are closely watching El Salvador to see if they should perhaps do this themselves if it works out well. So I got my fingers and toes and everything crossed, hoping for the best. Now, something that really gives me hope here is that El Salvador is not just announcing this law to get some attention and then leaving everyone to go fend for themselves. They're doing a lot more to help spearhead this change. Like number one, they're working with Strike, an app on Lightning Network, to make sure that the citizens can have really easy and affordable way to send and receive Bitcoin. Two, they're setting up a $150 million conversion fund that stores and merchants can use to instantly convert the Bitcoin they receive if they would rather hold USD instead. And third, the best of all, they're giving away $30 in Bitcoin to all citizens who sign up using their government app. These are really creative initiatives that I think could help kickstart their Bitcoin economy. But beyond all of these, there's some major second order effects from Bitcoin being considered legal tender by an actual country. I'm talking ripple effects for the United States and other countries all around the world. And a lot of this has to do with how Bitcoin is classified. That sounds boring, but it could change everything with regards to accounting, taxes, commercial law, banking status, things like that. Caitlin Long, who was a key figure in turning Wyoming into a Bitcoin haven, wrote a super long thread about the potential game-changing effects of this legal tender law. Basically, she says that Bitcoin would likely become money under US commercial law since now a foreign government uses it as a medium of exchange, which means that it could get special status by banks around the world who would treat it as a foreign currency. This may also change the super unfavorable accounting rules surrounding Bitcoin right now, by letting them account for it like any other foreign currency. Now, this change would make Michael Saylor super giddy because his company MicroStrategy holds a crap ton of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and also Tesla as well. This accounting change could potentially open the door for a lot more corporations to buy Bitcoin. Now, I'm going to leave it at that and link you to her thread down below, but fair warning, unless you're a lawyer, accountant, or some expert in those fields, most of those terms and concepts she mentions will likely fly over your head like it did for me. I want to stress though that Caitlin Long is putting out her highly educated guesses, but she's definitely not guaranteeing anything. I tend to believe that her indications do have merit though, that El Salvador's law will have ripple effects for Bitcoin around the world. After all, many global organizations like the IMF or the World Bank, who feels threatened by Bitcoin's power, have already tried to rain on our parade by expressing their reservations or objections to El Salvador's move. Now, did you know that to incentivize more Bitcoin entrepreneurs to move to their country, El Salvador is letting you get permanent residence for the low price of 3 Bitcoin. I already saw people on Twitter saying that they want to buy a house there because, after all, no one has to pay capital gains taxes on Bitcoin in El Salvador. That's one of the best parts about their legal tender law. And for El Salvador, they can spur more growth and investment in their country. I just want to know though, like if the price of Bitcoin changes, if Bitcoin drops much lower or rockets much higher, what are they going to do with this 3 BTC threshold? Any way you slice it, these are exciting times for Bitcoin. I'm sure all of us will have our eyes glued to El Salvador and hope and pray that it succeeds. Hopefully it will truly benefit their citizens and country so we can use it as an amazing case study for the question of why Bitcoin. By the way, while countries like El Salvador love and adopt Bitcoin, we have countries like China shun it. Be sure to watch this video to learn about China's recent mining and trading bans and why they're actually good for us long term. I'm Kevin from BFB, can't wait to see you on the next one, and cheers!